in the quiet town of Minden, Nevada. A power outage shut off every security camera in a 12-mile radius. 4 minutes later, a single freight train derailed. Inside, not passengers, but $312 million in untraceable Federal Reserve bearer bonds. The catch: the FBI swears the train was secure. The Treasury says no bonds were even on board. And the town? They're terrified to talk. This isn't a movie. It happened. And the people behind it were never caught. This is the most daring heist in American crime history. And it started with a piano tuner. Meet Isaac Mercer, a 51-year-old piano tuner from Elko County. Divorced, no kids, quiet, worked odd hours. But what no one noticed was that Isaac hadn't filed a tax return in 18 years. He paid for everything in cash, kept no online profiles, no streaming accounts, not even a driver's license renewal. But somehow, he owned 4 abandoned commercial properties across Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, each purchased with cash, and all registered to the name of a dead man. The story broke when a 19-year-old freelance photographer named Kenzie Wolf was flying her drone over the outskirts of Minden for a college documentary project. She wasn't supposed to be filming near the rail yard, but what she captured was something even the authorities missed. A silver SUV parked near the east perimeter, a minute before the town's power cut out. And then, an unmarked white truck backing up to the tracks. But here's the kicker. Neither vehicle had plates, and both disappeared seconds before the train crashed. When Kenzie showed the footage to local police, they passed it to Homeland Security. Within 24 hours, she received a cease and desist letter and was threatened with legal action for filming protected federal infrastructure. Kenzie deleted her video, but not before uploading a backup to a private archive, which someone else found. Enter Reagan Bishop, a disbarred civil engineer who once designed fault-tolerant systems for missile silos. Brilliant, paranoid, off-the-books kind of guy. He lost his license in 2012 after being caught stealing classified site schematics. But he didn't stop designing. He just changed clients. Reagan was obsessed with moving vaults, banks on wheels. Literally. He once told a colleague, if you want the perfect heist, don't rob the bank. Hijack the bank on its way to the vault. And that's exactly what this train was. Not a passenger line, a mobile reserve transit. According to freight schedules obtained through leaked whistleblower documents, train Unit 61C wasn't supposed to stop in Minden. Was rerouted because of a fake signal outage reported by an unknown telecom technician. Name on the job order? Isaac Mercer. The documents later showed that the reroute was approved with forged credentials from a now-defunct federal contractor. And in the train's final log, just 30 minutes before derailment, the last authorized stop was manually overridden to a dirt path that didn't exist on any public map. The train derailed at 2:42 a.m. Emergency responders arrived within 7 minutes. No bodies, no blood, emptied containers, and inside one sealed crate, a handwritten note taped to the wall. You were watching the wrong hands. By morning the bonds were gone. The cars used? Abandoned and scrubbed. Fingerprints? Wiped. DNA? Burned in acid. But here's the twist. The FBI found a single fingerprint on a plastic lunch container in the train's wreckage. One match. And it belonged to a former bomb technician who died in Iraq 11 years ago. So if he's dead, who left the print? In what is to happen next, we follow the only surviving witness, a retired freight operator who hasn't spoken in 9 years. Until now. And what he says changes everything. Subscribe now, because this story is just beginning. Lyle Crenshaw was a freight operator for over 30 years. He ran the early morning shift for the Minden line, knew every sound a train could make. But 9 years ago, after surviving a freak derailment, he withdrew from the world. No more train yards, no interviews, just a trailer home in the Nevada desert and silence. Until now. FBI agents revisiting the Minden heist found Lyle's name on an old manifest. He wasn't supposed to be on duty the night of the derailment, but records show Someone used his clearance to access the train's terminal override. And here's where it gets strange. Lyle's keycard was physically scanned at the Minden control panel, 5 minutes before the derailment. But the timestamp? Logged from a location 122 miles away. The FBI brought in a behavioral linguist to try and get Lyle to talk. It didn't work. He stared through them for 26 minutes. Then he looked straight into the camera and whispered. They rewrote time. At first, investigators dismissed it as trauma-induced delusion. But then the analyst cross-referenced Lyle's schedule the month before the heist. Turns out, Lyle had filled out a paper schedule for a shift that never existed. A phantom entry. 4 Train Unit 61C. 9 months before it was even commissioned. Which raised a chilling question. Who gave him that schedule, and why? Enter Jada N. Wright, a low-level procurement specialist with no criminal record, and a near-photographic memory. She worked for Axis Materials, a defense subcontractor that went under after a Senate audit uncovered billions in redundant inventory. One of her jobs? Acquiring outdated Cold War rail schematics. In her own words, it was like buying junk no one wanted, maps, line data, fiber optic conversions, stuff from the 80s. Except, one of the lines in her files wasn't junk. It was a decommissioned loop line, built under the Reagan administration, designed for nuclear missile freight diversion. A route that could be switched without notice, invisible to public GPS, accessible only by analog override. Guess where that line terminated? Just outside Minden, Nevada. The working theory? This wasn't a robbery. It was a redirection. Train Unit 61C never crashed. It was diverted. A decoy explosion staged using decommissioned explosives from Fort Chapman, which, by the way, reported missing charges 5 months before. A train was destroyed. Yes, but it wasn't carrying the bonds. The real 61C? It rerouted through the Reagan-era missile freight line and resurfaced briefly on satellite imaging outside of Durango, Colorado. That image was buried in NOAA weather satellite data, later flagged by an independent analyst. He reported it, and was found dead of carbon monoxide poisoning 48 hours later. Here's where everything changes. The assigned conductor for Train 61C was Martin Levins. Except, Martin never showed up that night, because he died of a heart attack 2 days earlier. Yet, his keycard was scanned, his signature was on the override, and surveillance from the Salt Flats refueling station shows a man with his exact build and gait, boarding the train. But when facial recognition software ran the footage, there was no match, not even partial biometric data. It's as if the system couldn't even see his face. In what is to happen next, we trace the bond serial numbers, and uncover an underground exchange in Buenos Aires where the money was laundered into artwork, forged passports, and encrypted analog currency. We'll meet the man behind it, a retired American intelligence analyst turned art dealer, who's been hiding in plain sight for 15 years, and who may just be the one who orchestrated it all. Hit subscribe, because if you think this ends in America, you're not ready for what happens next. Let us recap a bit so far. We discovered the train carrying $312 million was never destroyed. It was redirected through a Cold War-era missile freight line. A conductor who died 2 days before the heist still somehow boarded. And the only surviving witness claimed time itself had been rewritten. Now, the money resurfaces. Not in a bank, not in a vault, but inside a Buenos Aires art gallery. And the man running it? A former U.S. intelligence analyst, who vanished from the government database in 2010, and reappeared under a new name, selling stolen canvases in South America. So, let's dive in further into this mystery. In the Palermo Soho district of Buenos Aires sits an unlisted building with no sign. Locals know it only as the Silent Room. No social media. No sales recorded. Yet inside, priceless artwork from known European masters quietly disappears into private collections. This is where Calvin Rem re-emerged. Officially, Rem died in 2010. A heart attack during a diplomatic mission in Serbia. But fingerprints lifted from a smuggled lithograph matched his old CIA field file. and surveillance shows him in the gallery, walking with a cane, slower, older, but alive. When confronted by a freelance journalist last year, Rem smiled and said, "Dead men don't pay taxes." Here's where the brilliance of the operation becomes clear. Bearer bonds, untraceable by design, were still logged by serial number. 5 months after the Minden derailment, one of those serials appeared again. Not at a bank, not in cash, but under UV light on the back of a forged painting. It was a hidden signature, embedded in oil paint, below a fake 1923 landscape. An analyst confirmed that 5 more paintings held similar numerical engravings, invisible to the naked eye but detectable through polarized light. Each painting sold for $1 to $2 million to offshore buyers. The real buyers? Unknown. But the payments? Sent through analog currency exchange terminals tied to non-digital ledgers in Istanbul, Caracas, and Luanda. The laundering trail was genius. No blockchain. No online logs. Just human couriers. And old-school ledger books. Before he was presumed dead, Rem authored an unpublished internal white paper. Title, Redirection Strategy, Wealth Movement Without Network Dependence. His argument? Digital security has a shelf life. Physical deception lasts centuries. Inside that paper, Rem outlined how to use analog infrastructures, like rail systems, vault couriers, and art, to move money invisibly across borders. He even cited a test case in Nevada, with redacted dates. And here's the kicker. The document was marked classified, level 6, but the clearance tag was forged. One buyer stood out. A Texas-based oil magnate named William Huxley Vance. Publicly a collector. Privately? A disgraced military contractor whose firm was blacklisted after supplying faulty drones to the Department of Defense. Vance had quietly purchased 6 of Rem's paintings in a 2-year span, all paid in physical bearer instruments and gold notes. When questioned, he claimed the art was a personal passion. But investigators later found one of those paintings concealed a microfilm roll hidden behind a false canvas. The contents? Declassified mission routes for Cold War nuclear trains, maps, codes, schedules, and a chilling inscription. History repeats for those who know where to reroute it. 3 weeks ago, an anonymous tip led federal agents to a long-abandoned shipping warehouse in Savannah, Georgia. Inside, they discovered dozens of train containers, empty, but labeled with shipping codes that matched Train Unit 61C. In the corner of the warehouse was a weathered briefcase. Inside, a stack of unused train overrides, maps of alternate rail corridors, a photo of Isaac Mercer, the piano tuner, and taped to the wall, a single phrase written in red marker. Phase 2 begins when they look away. What is Phase 2? Who's really orchestrating this? And was the heist ever really about the money? In the final twist to come, we go deep into a secret meeting in the Mojave Desert, where 3 men planned this heist 12 years ago. We reveal the code name used by the operatives, the retired Army colonel who financed the operation, and how the next phase isn't about stealing wealth. It's about collapsing systems. If you think this was a heist, wait until you see what they're about to steal next. Subscribe now, because this doesn't end with money. It ends with control. In a remote corner of the Mojave Desert, 3 men stood inside an abandoned missile silo. One was an Army colonel with access to Cold War transport systems. Another, a piano tuner with no formal education in engineering. The third, an ex-CIA analyst with a forged death certificate, holding a blueprint marked Collapse Protocol. That moment was the beginning of the most daring heist in American crime history. But the money? That was never the endgame. It was a test for something far more dangerous. His name was Colonel Nathan Harrow, a decorated logistics strategist for the U.S. Army with access to base-level freight operations and satellite blind spots. He retired in 2006. Officially. Unofficially, he disappeared. But when the Savannah warehouse was raided, a retinal scanner hidden in a wall cavity led to a single encrypted name, Harrow. Harrow's background revealed connections to Reagan-era emergency protocols, designed to reroute military assets in case of nuclear war. These routes weren't just hidden. They were deliberately erased from public infrastructure records. Guess who helped write the original codes? A young systems engineer named Reagan Bishop, the architect, the planner, and the one who made this heist seem like a robbery, when in reality it was a systems hijack. Inside the recovered briefcase was a leather-bound manual. On the cover, Open 923 Omega, Collapse Protocol. Inside, detailed contingency plans outlining how to shut down key American financial routes, without triggering a cyber attack. Instead, it used analog systems, rail reroutes, manual freight manifest, paper bond circulation, courier-based laundering. One phrase appeared over 17 times in the document. Make it look like greed. Hide the architecture inside the crime. In other words, make the world think a few men stole money, when what they really did was steal the rails beneath the economy. Remember the fingerprint found on the lunch container? Matched to a bomb technician supposedly killed in Iraq? There's more. A new DNA test was run through an international database. It didn't just match one person. It matched two. Identical genetic structure, different dates of birth, different countries. One was the technician. The other? A train conductor in Peru who died in 2015. Experts theorized they were cloned operatives. Untraceable identities, genetically engineered to avoid recognition by traditional biometric systems. Too wild? Maybe. But documents recovered from REM's Buenos Aires gallery included shipping records from a black site off the coast of French Guiana, long rumored to be a testing ground for deep field operatives. The final twist came from a decrypted phone call recorded just 72 hours before the Minden derailment. A voice, believed to be Harrow's, says, Phase 1 proved the system's fragility. Phase 2 proves dependency. Then we pull the string. The string? A term analysts now believe refers to a financial domino effect. If the rail systems can be redirected without anyone noticing, and wealth can be laundered without digital trace, what happens when multiple sectors are hit simultaneously? Trains, couriers, fuel pipelines, all tied to outdated but still operational infrastructure, all mapped out inside Collapse Protocol. This wasn't just a heist, it was a simulation, and the final target is trust. Trust in financial security, trust in infrastructure, trust in government oversight. 3 weeks ago, Homeland Security issued a silent directive to private rail operators. The warning? Check your switches. Audit your analog logs. Look for irregularities in routes that feel normal. Why? Because one of the override codes found in Savannah had today's date. And earlier this morning, a maintenance worker in Pittsburgh reported seeing a train labeled 61C passing through an unscheduled line, with no operator, no lights, and no record of departure. The most daring heist in American crime history isn't over, because the players are still out there. And the blueprint was never about stealing money. It was about showing us how easily it could be taken. How infrastructure, if mapped just right, can be bypassed with no alarms, no passwords, no firewalls. Just old rail, old codes, and older men who never left the game. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started. Comment below what you want us to uncover next, and we just might follow the tracks wherever they lead.